East Cliff.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Wild Night at East Cliff.
For life. Again?
Yes, that's why he's not here.
Another one.
Oh, that's right. Good morning, everyone. I call to order the December 2022 meeting of the Governance and Policy Committee. Thank you for those who are joining us via the live stream video and for those attending us here in the boardroom at the Twin Cities campus. Our first item today is to review potential enhancements to board public engagement. To walk us through the potential enhancements are Executive Director Steves and Ms. Krista Overby, our new Communications and Engagement Manager. So Executive Director Steves, would you like to start?
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the committee, we're delighted to be back here again today on this topic. As you know, we've had a couple of previous conversations about public engagement broadly, about how the board does that across a range of activities. And then we've focused more specifically on public comment opportunities or ways that individuals provide input directly to you as regents and to the board as it makes decisions. And so we've been listening to your conversations, we've been listening to your feedback, we've also been, as you know, looking at peer institutions, and we're excited to bring forward today a recommendation for your review that sets up a pilot program that would provide a new avenue for public input and engagement with the board. The guiding principles for this pilot that we've outlined in the docket are to effectively support the board in building trust and demonstrating accountability. As we've talked about before, that's one of the key things that a governing board needs to do. To recognize that public engagement practices evolve over time, and that as we have in the past, as we've evolved and changed some of the practices that the board has had in the past, as we look to the future, we need to continue to do that. We need to continue to look for a custom fit to meet the needs of today. And then finally, we really want to leverage technology and new technology to advance access and make public comment more inclusive. One of the things that you'll hear today is that we really placed a premium on equal access, anytime, anywhere access. And so as we outline this, you'll hear these principles come through in the recommendation. So the recommendation itself comes in three parts. The first is to maintain. We've talked a lot about the engagement activities that this board does already. This includes the annual budget forum, other public forums as required, the opportunity for individuals to comment, and so forth. And so we think that all of those have been tried and true, and that they've been a firm foundation for this board to gather input, and so we would maintain those items. And then we've got a couple of other prongs of this recommendation, and for those, Ms. Krista Overby is going to outline them.
Ms. Overby.
Thank you, Chair Verhalen and members of the committee. As you all know, I'm new to board staff, and I'm happy to already find myself here in the horseshoe, only 2, maybe 3 months in. As Mr. Steves mentioned, I'll continue by outlining parts 2 and 3 mentioned in the docket item summary. The first being how we intend to enhance the board's public engagement with a public comment portal pilot program, and the second part being an evaluation of that pilot program. So the portal that we're proposing would exist in addition to each of the current and existing engagement areas, and would be integrated as a component of the board's existing website. We believe that there are several benefits to this enhancement. First, that it creates a much more visible and transparent public comment feature, which leverages technology to link comments directly into the board's docket materials. Second, this portal permits for asynchronous comments, as Mr. Steves mentioned, and this helps to remove any time and place-based barriers for members of the community that may not live close to the McNamara Alumni Center or may be located in a different time zone. And third, the portal has the potential to establish the board as a leader in public engagement by embracing the hybrid nature of today's work. To determine the feasibility of such a portal program, we explored technical solutions. We met with a variety of state agencies to learn what is currently out there in the state of Minnesota, as well as we met with some internal experts at the U of M. So to start, we reached out to the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board to learn about a public comment portal that they had used in recent rulemaking for written comments. And they referred us to the Office of Administrative Hearings, and we met with them and learned about some video comment collection technology solutions. We also met with internal experts just to see what exists at the U and what potential tech we could use and integrate and take pieces and parts from to put together a more robust public comment portal. With each meeting, we did gain confidence that the path forward is feasible. And while our research did show there's no off-the-shelf solution for a very robust portal, we are in the early stages and we have ideas of how we could use multiple integrations to get to where we want to be. So with that, I'll walk through what we imagine the portal could look like. We imagine it would be part of the board's existing website, similar to how we have a public comment written contact us submission form right now. So it would be integrated potentially into that part of the website, and when a user would visit the portal, they would see a disclaimer and set of guidelines that would reinforce civility, respectfulness, and constructive input. And they would also be told at that time that this comment that would be submitted would be made publicly available. And the portal would then ask, similar to just an information form, some key data points such as first name, last name, the comment type or format, be that written, video, or audio. And then it would also ask for the comment topic. And we're proposing that we could take topics based on agenda items for each meeting, be that budget, public safety, etc. And we imagine that comment windows would be pre-specified in advance of each meeting, and then that would allow board staff to be able to screen comments in advance of linking them live to the public docket to screen for information, non-public information or profanity and so on. After review, the comments would be aggregated by topic area and linked into the board's public docket for full transparency. And then the third and final part of our proposal today is to evaluate the pilot. So the board office is proposing that we would, if approved, today is for discussion, if approved at the February meeting, we would work with technologists at the U to pull together a pilot program and have it be live for the September meeting. And then we would run it for 5 full meetings. And at that point, we would solicit feedback from regents, commenters, members of the community to assess how the pilot is going. We would then present that feedback for discussion at a spring meeting, and then we would determine the feasibility and longevity of the program at that point. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thanks, Ms. Overby. Before we move on to regent questions, just a couple clarifying items. So this plan would be a trial. It's not something we're incorporating into current policy, correct?
Correct. It would be a pilot program to start, and then potentially in spring 2024, it could be codified into policy. But at this point, it is just a pilot program.
Sure. So it's kind of a hovering over policy program. The second item, this will not change any of the existing public engagement activities we currently have. So there will still be the annual operating budget forum where individuals are able to speak before this board as well as provide written comments, et cetera. There will still be all public forums as required by law, traffic ordinances, body cameras, et cetera. Individual requests to address the board, as stated in the bylaws of the Board of Regents, will remain. We'll still have 8 non-voting student representatives to the board. We'll receive oral and written reports from the SCC and the FCC every semester, written reports from our P&A consultative committee and the Civil Service Consultative Committee annually. All of the direct emails to the regents will still be available, as well as all of the other reports and things that we just revised the process for this last year. Those will all remain, correct?
Madam Chair, that's correct. Yep.
And one comment I just want to make, first of all, thank you to our staff for all of the time you invested in meeting with others and talking with others. The opportunity to not just do what others are doing, but to do something different and really kind of front of line on some of these things is really intriguing. Ms. Overby, you mentioned being able to meet people where they are if they're in a different time zone or not geographically located here. Through this portal, I think something that's also really important is to recognize this board meets during what would be considered typical business hours, 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And for a lot of individuals who are in school, who are working, who have transportation concerns, who have family concerns or commitments, being able to appear here in the room in front of this body could be a barrier to providing those comments. Perhaps they don't want to write something they would like to address in spoken word. And so I see this as an opportunity to provide that and see what kinds of responses and interaction we get and see if we as a board are getting and augmenting the public engagement in the ways we are taking that in and really considering that as we move forward. Are there any comments from other regions? Regent Mayron.
I like the direction we're moving here in that we're providing a variety of avenues for people to communicate to us, and I like the fact that what we are adding to already our portfolio of what constituents can communicate to us about, that this is an avenue for them to communicate specifically regarding agenda items that we will be addressing and getting their input. And giving them different ways to do that. So I'm in favor of that. I'm trying to what I would like to understand is how timing-wise it works. And so any thoughts from those of you who have worked on this on the administration side to address this would be helpful. And the reason I say that is the agenda comes out with the meeting materials a week before our meetings, if I have the timing right, on Thursday. So that people are not going to have an opportunity to review what's available to the public until a week before our meeting, if I'm correct. We're not going to be able to necessarily get their input before that time. They may anticipate certain things coming up, but they won't know exactly what's on the agenda. So that means they need to get the materials and they're available to us as well that Thursday before. And then they've got to read through them, or at least go to the ones that they're interested in, and then compile whatever medium they want to use, their response or their input. And then you all need to go through your process, or I say you meaning the administration, to review them for appropriate content or not appropriate content, aggregate them, and then make them available to us so that we can read them before we come to the meetings here on Thursday. So my question is really about, is there adequate time to allow for this kind of input, to receive it, and then to be able to get it from you all and for us to digest it?
Yeah, Mr. Steves, do you want to start off? I know we've talked about this a bit.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, a couple things I'll pick up on previously, your comments too. We are quite excited about the possibility of this being something that really leapfrogs over what we're seeing other boards do. This would be completely innovative. This is not something that, even as we've learned, even state agencies are trying to figure out how to do this, how to leverage technology exactly to do this, and we know that there's not off-the-shelf software designed to do it what we're talking about. We would cobble together some other software. We're pretty confident we can do it. But it's much more robust than just submitting written comments. It's upload your video off your phone to say you want to comment on something, and here's my comment in a 2-minute video or a 3-minute video. or an audio file. And being able to do that with everybody walking around with these devices in their pocket and being able to comment on something is a powerful new tool that we're not seeing anybody else having out there. Nobody's doing this, and so we're quite excited about that. And that leads me to your question, Regent Mayron. We don't know yet exactly how to piece together all of the timing of it. The agenda for your meetings is usually posted a week prior to the docket being posted. So the agenda is out at least a week prior to that and posted on the website. And so that's 2 weeks prior to the meeting. And then a week prior to the meeting, the docket is posted. By the way, that is very uncommon for your entire dockets to be posted to the public a week in advance. I mean, incredibly uncommon. And so already we are being way more transparent than most every peer in this respect. And so we need to think about, we would have this comment portal available all of the time, and people could make comments. What we're trying to figure out is how granular it would be tied to the agenda. It may be that it's more like general topics that we know are probably going to be coming up on the agenda. And so it may not be that I want to comment on item 3A on your agenda, which was a real estate transaction, but it may be more that they want to comment on mission fulfillment topics or public safety as a topic or something more general. And so we're still working that out. And we do have the other wrinkle, and Ms. Overby spoke about it. We are trying to figure out, because a key difference here is, right now you get emails, and those emails go from the commenter to you, and you see them, but the element that's different about public comment is that people want to see what the comments are. And it's like on a news article, when you read a news article and then people go down and you click on the comments and people want to see, well, what are the comments? What do other people think about this thing? And that's the element that's different with this proposal, is that's what we're proposing, is that the comments actually become public, that people, like we've been doing in the budget forum, we've actually kind of pre-piloted this with the budget forum in the past couple of years, because what we've done is we've taken all of the written comments that we receive ahead of your budget forum and we publish them in the docket. But doing that, we've done the same thing that we're proposing here. We screen out, if somebody goes on a profanity-laced tirade, we're not putting that in the public docket. If someone were to put information in there that were protected private personnel data, we wouldn't put that in the docket. And so we do need a little bit of space to do that screening. We are not in any way screening out or filtering the comments you receive, but we would not publish to the public those kinds of comments. We could still make those comments available to you as regents if you wished to see them. So I don't know is the answer. We think we can put together a timeline that works, and we're fairly confident that we have technology that will do this. But we are also recognizing that we're creating a whole new opportunity for public comment with this proposal.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Regent
No,
Mayron?
thank you.
Regent Farnsworth.
Thank you, Chair Verhalen. A few points of feedback. I think in general, the direction we're heading is positive. I think it's no surprise what I think about public engagement and wanting to expand opportunities. A few things. One, I think we have to, I want to make sure we're being careful not to be too prescriptive about folks' public comment. I at first was hearing that it might be tied more to agenda items, but then I just heard Executive Director Steves say maybe it'd be available more broadly. I think it's important to let folks, be able to comment through whatever portal or whatever the final platform ends up being, comments, of interest to them. I understand that this distinction can be made, say, in school board meetings and live public comment where someone who is commenting on an agenda item may be prioritized. That might be prioritized. Someone who hasn't spoken in 3 months oftentimes gets prioritized, but there's still the opportunity for someone to comment on whatever is of interest to them, and I think that's really important. The second thing I would say, looking at our docket materials, around the screening. I think screening for private personnel data makes sense, profanity or anything, like that. But I read the term civility and constructive input, and that gave me a little bit of pause because I think those can be very subjective terms when assessing, when setting guidelines and guardrails that would be developed and provided to commenters in advance. I want us to stay away from engaging or from judging folks' comments on the term civility and constructive input. That made me a little nervous. I think also in terms of as we get to the timing pieces that Regent Mayron was talking a little about, I would go above and beyond in terms of placing value on being able to see other folks' comments. I think that's important. I also think there's value to the public seeing us actually hear feedback. I think that's the value of public comment in real time, and I get that I don't think that's necessarily the will of this board, but I think there's value in people seeing that we've actually reviewed feedback. And I don't know how we demonstrate that in a situation like this, but that's a value that's important to me. And then I just wanted to ask a clarifying question about the pilot. So it looks like this new portal will be completed by August 2023. So then, just if I have it correct, it would be then ran for the September, October, and December 2023 board meetings, February. I can't remember what we do. I can't remember March. I know March, sometimes we have a regular business meeting or not, and then May. And then we'd assess after that. I think, it's clear that we're doing something innovative. I like doing innovative things from a board process governance standpoint. It's a little longer timeline than I would have hoped for. But, I think we are making progress in this. And so I want to balance, having feedback with also understanding that, we are making progress on this engagement item. So those would be my points of feedback. I welcome responses or not, but I think that's it for me for now. So thank you, Chair.
Executive Director Steves.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the questions. Part of the difference you heard with whether it would be specifically tied to agenda items or more generally topical is exactly the point that you're talking about, Regent Farnsworth, which is we want to ensure that the portal can be up and live all of the time. But we also are trying to think about on the back end how you receive the input and information and trying to organize it. Would you, for instance, see 50 comments in a row on 38 different topics, or would you like to know the 10 comments that were related to public safety, the 5 comments related to a real estate transaction, and so forth? And so that's what we're trying to sort out, is how much sorting we do so that when you get the information, it's easier to consume. And so that's the nature of, does it get more tied to agenda topics so that it's easier to consume? Is it more kind of whatever came in and you kind of have to pick through it? And so we're trying to sort that out. We don't, again, have it completely figured out, and that's partly why we're recommending this as a pilot, because there's a lot of detail, because we're looking at both a technology solution that we need to stand up and run and operate, but we also are just trying to think about from a user standpoint, from a board member standpoint, what it is that you're taking in and consuming so that it's valuable to you as decision makers. With regard to the reference to respectfulness and civility, what we're anticipating is not that we would be ever filtering based on that, or that we would stand in judgment of people's comments. But we do think there's some value in having someone read a statement and click that they acknowledge the statement before they make a comment. And we think that there is setting the right tone for what we expect, and some level of decorum we think is the right thing. And so that's what we would suggest, is that they at least read some acknowledgement. At minimum, we need them to read an acknowledgement to indicate to us that they understand that their comment would be made public. And so that was the one thing that we already know we have to have them understand that that's happening. And then with regard to the timeline, we do think that that March meeting would probably be the 5th meeting, that March 2024. And so we would be looking at probably the May or June meeting coming back with the findings or results or feedback about the pilot.
Any follow-up?
Thanks, Chair Verhalen. Thank you, Executive Director Steves, for that. I'm in terms of the sorting and all that, I'm still hearing some things that are making me a little nervous, but I want to be clear, I'm not prescribing a motive or intent to anyone. I just am trying to interpret what this may look like to the public. And so seeing those words in my docket made me a little nervous. And then I just want to say, from my standpoint, I would be okay sorting through things and respecting, whatever the public wants to comment about. And just wanting to not give the impression that we're going to be, from a functionality standpoint, I totally get it, but I'm really trying to think about what would this appear like to the university community. So thank you.
Sure, and the specific languages that you referenced, civility and constructive input, was related to the set of guidelines that'll be developed that we'll have a chance to review before they're posted, as far as these are the guidelines for participating in the public portal. And to the other point, the non-public data, personnel data, or extreme profanity are the items that would not be posted as public. That was the difference that I heard being explained. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that's correct. And I'll add, but would still be available to you as regents.
Right.
It's just the question of what is
Public.
put out back into the public domain.
Correct. Regent Powell.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. So a couple of clarifying questions. So this is really primarily for video comment, or so what are the, I didn't get it all. What are the formats? Is it video, written, audio, or all of the above?
Ms. Overby.
Yep, thank you, Chair Verhalen, Regent Powell. We do imagine the opportunity to collect video, written, and audio. Currently, the website supports written comment. So this pilot would be exploring the integration of how to collect video and audio files, and then how to compile them into the docket. So it would be enhancing just by adding those two to the existing written availability.
And so would this become, because we all get a lot of email, and so would all of those written comments go through this website, or so the public would continue to have the opportunity to email us directly to our email address?
Correct. They will still have the opportunity to email us, but if they wish to just do it once to the portal instead of copying everyone, they can, or if they want to write it to the portal and email everyone, those options will still be available to them.
Good. And then final comment, I do think that the email commentary that we get might be a pretty good indicator of what this.
Regent Powell,
This-
you and your microphone are not getting along.
I know.
Yesterday and today.
So the email usage that we all see might be a pretty good indicator of how this is likely to go, and especially when we think about linkage to the agenda. I mean, I just speaking for myself, 98% of the email that I get is on two topics, athletics and safety. Those emails have continued over 2 years. So I mean, these are just areas of high public interest. And so I think it's good to link to the agenda and highlight the things that we're working on, but the traffic, I'm guessing, will likely migrate to a few issues that will go on for a long time. And even our own, process for resolving issues, I mean, it's on an agenda, but as discussed, and then could be another, it could go on for quite, so the pilot will be good. We'll find out. I mean, I think they're probably going to be concentrated. They'll go on a long time. They might link to the agenda, but over time, maybe less so. I think all of that's fine, and we'll learn about that through the pilot.
Regent Kenyanya.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. I mean, I think this is really great. First, want to offer my thanks, Regent Farnsworth, for just kind of bringing up this issue, and then committee leadership and staff for really all the work. I mean, I think this is definitely a good proposal. I want to clarify on that, just the conversation that Regent Farnsworth was having about the tying it to the agenda. What I understand from your response, Mr. Steves, is that you're talking about sorting, not filtering.
Yes.
They'll all end up there, but they'll be grouped according, okay, I think that was a misunderstanding, and maybe even for me initially. I think that's helpful, rather than going, but they're all gonna be there. It's just about the, okay. Because that's, putting them in order of the date they were received isn't any more useful, to us either. So I think that makes sense. I like that the ones deemed, to have personal information and inappropriate will still be available to the board. So I think that's helpful. Region I think you are right. We're still going to see a lot of those high traffic ones about certain issues, but others pop up as other things come and go from the agenda. So I think that'll be reflected there as well. I too initially was like, oh man, August is far out, but when you think about the software side component involved, and I think the written part would be easy, but once you add the audio and video, it could be done sooner, but those are resources, that would have to be put around that. So I think I can understand that as well. So just really appreciate this coming forward and the efforts behind it. And then this is a comment, not a question, but I know we talked about all the other avenues we currently have for public input, which will continue, which is great. And I just wanted to reiterate something that P&A and civil service have conveyed to me is their desire to also have an oral presentation. So that's perhaps just feedback for the next year's agenda development, just for consideration, which, may be different leadership, but I imagine staff has noted that. But otherwise, just want to offer my compliments to this.
Thank you, and I heard Executive Director Steve's furiously writing there, so that comment has been noted for sure. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Chair Verhalen. And following that, this topic took a turn. This wasn't what I was expecting months ago when this first came up. And I think it's a great idea. I think I would say that I would expect a little difference between the emails that we currently get and these videos, because we get a lot of form emails, right, where it's easy just to click, and where here it takes some effort. I guess people could all read the same script, but more than likely, I think there'll be more individual commentary, which I think will be valuable. I would also point out to the public, you don't have to wait to August. You can take a video, attach it to an email, and send it to us now. So
I'm not sure our email management system is quite ready for that.
with all apologies to our IT folks.
Computer-aided animation.
Computer-aided, I like that.
Here we
Very
go.
nice. And so I think it's wonderful, and I look forward to seeing it. May end up using it myself at some point, but just in case you miss me.
There's going to be a checkbox.
Well, there we go. That's right.
to start with.
Why?
Just for you, Regent.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Make a note.
ROWSHA won't get tracked by the filter, I'm sure. But at the same time, I do want to say that I think that, just a couple comments. One is that, the presence factor is, I think, still important. I presume we'll still have the commentary to the budget. These things aren't mutually exclusive. This wouldn't prevent us from having an open public comment period. I note that, families and friends have access to phone and email and text and Instagram and other social media, and yet we still show up for weddings, because being there in person has an impact, in a way. Just we'll send you a clip of our vows, and that hasn't quite taken hold yet. But we have a remote opportunity now, but I think that having all of us in the room is valuable. So I still feel like that's something that I would find favorable. I would think that still having an opportunity for people to come in and speak, there are certainly risks. As everybody who's ever been on a county board or a school board knows, there's a risk of discomfort at times. But especially as the world grows and populations grow, we become a smaller percentage of our communities, and it's easy to become less significant, and I think those opportunities are still valuable. And then the last thing I'll say off of this is regarding Regent Mayron's comment. I think that's actually sort of a trend, and I don't have a statistical analysis of this, but adherence to the info action process, info 1 month, action the next, that has always been a very important part for the community to be able to weigh in on issues for the Board of Regents. Yesterday the topic of, I think, probably the most robust discussion is tucked into the consent agenda, info action in the same month. So the public will really not have any opportunity to weigh in on their thoughts about the transition or the change in the dynamic on that topic. So, just a word of caution is the more we move away from the info 1 month, action the next month, the less the public has an opportunity to digest it, comment on it, and inform our decision making. So this will give them an opportunity to speak, but I totally agree. If you have something coming out a couple of days in advance, info action at the same meeting, that really does remove the opportunity for people to even know that it's happening. And so I would just urge that the board leadership try to adhere to what has been a pretty successful process in the past for the public to be informed and be able to weigh in on issues. So thank you.
We have 2 additional comments, and then we'll move on to item number 2. Regent Taurabe. Sorry, I'm really trying to pronounce it correctly, so my apologies.
That's perfectly fine. No, thank you, Chair Verhalen and Executive Director Steves and Ms. Overby. I think in general, I'm supportive of the direction too. Certainly as somebody who has worked with a community that doesn't always write, I think really exploring kind of both the audio and the video components of comments will be really helpful. I'm curious about how this will be communicated to kind of the audience, because I think the whole intention of this was to get the community to be more attentive to what we might be working on this board. So to me, that feels like it would be important. It would be a lot of work put into a process and tools if sort of the community doesn't know about it, right? And I think that those who have been engaged in this board for a long time or feel comfortable with the way that they've been able to access or maybe not access the board will probably still be that way no matter where we are. So I feel like the communications of this new tool or this new accessibility option, I think would be really helpful. And I think that's just important to think about. I also want to say that tying it to the agenda in terms of the public comment is helpful. And then I have some also just making sure that as people want to communicate things that are not on the agenda in an ongoing way, that is something that we continue to think about. But it feels like none of the other options are going away, so that's good to know. And then I guess it might be important as we set agendas to think about when there would be times where we would allow for more public presence. That would make sense, but those are just my comments and insight, and also really appreciative of all of the work that the staff have put in to coming up with the proposal.
Executive Director Steves, before this comes back before us in February, I do think, to Regent Taurabe's point, it'd be really helpful to, just get some ideas from OBR on communicating the availability of this when it does go live, so to speak, in August, or with the goal in August, and how we can think about communicating that to the broader community, other than what were the statistics? Regent Kenyanya, 6 people who are watching the governance and policy meeting besides the leaders that are here?
Up to 4.
Okay. Sounds about right.
And 2 are his mother and sister.
Regent Hipsch.
Thanks, Chair Verhalen. When I first heard of this, I really wasn't for it because of the size of our state and the size alumni association and this, you know, we have over 600,000 people in our alumni association living all over the world. And then when I heard of this idea, I thought, good job, board, you know, for coming up with this. I think it's a great idea because we can meet people where they're at and we can, you know, in the time that they can do it. And for somebody from, like, I'm 3 hours from here. I'm not going to drive down here for a 3-minute discussion with the board, but I would do it on video. And I think that that's just as impactful. And then we can all watch it when we want to, and I think we're going to get a fair amount of input. So I'm really in favor of this policy. It's going to be a good trial run, and we'll see how it goes. You know, if we get 100 hours of video, I don't know how we're going to watch it all. You know, and I think everybody's going to assume that we're going to be able to do it all. I don't know, you know. I know we're all really busy people. We'll have to wait and see how it goes, but that's why we're doing a trial, so thank you.
Right, and that's why I appreciate the timing proposal from OBR of five meetings of this to figure out what does and doesn't work and what additional things we may end up experiencing that we didn't foresee when we set off. So thank you. This has been a really robust and helpful discussion, and we look forward to February, where it will be a review and action item, correct?
For action.
Up for action, yes, that's right. All the check boxes on my agendas here. All right. Our next item is a discussion of Regents Emeriti employment at the university. We added this item to the governance and policy work plan in September. Vice Chair Hipsch and I asked the board office to put together some initial information to help inform our discussion. That's in your docket. But here to provide that information is Mr. Jason Langworthy, our policy manager and assistant secretary. So Mr. Langworthy, would you please proceed?
Chair Verhalen, members of the committee, good morning. We're going to be looking at page 5 of your docket. So as Chair Verhalen noted, our office, working with our friends in the Office of the General Counsel, performed an initial high-level analysis looking at this topic across Big Ten, now soon to be Big Ten, and peer institution bylaws, and came up with a few examples that we wanted to highlight for you today, just to give you, again, a sense of the landscape. This is by no means a comprehensive review. This was sort of a first look across, but hopefully some helpful examples here. So we'll start with Penn State. Penn State does have in their bylaws a provision that no trustee may be employed by the university in any capacity before the 5th anniversary of the date in which the person last served as a trustee. They do have the allowance that it can be approved, that can be waived by action of their board of trustees. Interesting here, it goes both ways. So if you're a former employee, you also have to wait 5 years before you can be a trustee. So they have it on both sides of the coin, so to speak.
But for that, just for clarification, for that reverse one, there's no waiver by the board, though, in their...
There appears to be no waiver in the board per their bylaws. They have a larger board than you do, and it's also broken down by various groups. So the governor gets a few seats, the Alumni Association gets a few seats, but the membership criteria does not appear to allow an exemption for that 5 years as compared to a trustee then serving as an employee.
Interesting, okay. Apologies, thank you.
Moving then to the University of California Board of Regents, they don't have a provision around their Regents Emeriti, but what was interesting here is they do have a provision that allows a regent to be eligible for uncompensated employment or appointment to a university-affiliated position upon approval by the chair and vice chair of their governance committee, and then they have a provision about if the chair and vice chair are unable to act because maybe it's one of them who steps in at that point. But this was just an interesting provision. They, again, don't have any restrictions on once you're off of their board to pursue employment, but it was interesting that they had this uncompensated employment. This is very different, right? Most of our peers, including yourselves, have a provision that restricts employment at the university. It does not mention either if it's unpaid or paid, with the exception of seats that are held. So, for example, for for you, for the student who's elected at time of appointment, right? That, in your policy, is exempted. Most institutions where they have a seat that is, has that type of requirement is also exempted. Otherwise here, this was just an interesting provision of how they're dealing with employment. Then turning to the South and the University of Iowa. So the University of Iowa does not have autonomy like you do, so they are bound by Iowa code. And the specific Iowa code deals with the prohibited use of influence. And the specific section within the Iowa code talks about the head of a commission or on a board, and prevents then that service for up to 2 years. So you've completed your work on the Iowa Board of Regents. You need to wait 2 years before you can either be employed or you can provide services to the University of Iowa. So for example, you roll off the board, maybe then you want to give some consulting or some legal advice back to the University of Iowa. You would be restricted under the Iowa code from doing that for a period of 2 years. We did clarify, because there was a question that came up in our docket preview. It does not restrict you from moving elsewhere, from going, say, and working for another part of the Iowa state government, just the University of Iowa, just the area that you have supervised as a board member or trustee.
And this code is specific to all state agencies, boards, and commissions?
Correct, and that's,
Okay.
yep, because it covers all boards and state agencies. It's broader because it's a part of their state statute.
Thank you.
And then moving finally to, over to Michigan State. So Michigan State, embedded within their broad Board of Trustees conflict of interest policy, which would be akin to your Board of Regents policy on code of conduct for members of the Board of Regents. Certainly there they have the provision, much like you, where no trustee shall have a particular interest, direct or indirect, in any contract with the university, right? That you can't, for one of your businesses, get the university to, say, give you a contract for your services. What they do is they also then extend that to trustees emeriti for a period of 1 year following the end of their term of office. So similarly, again, the trustees can't, get a personal benefit, and then they extend that for 1 year, so you can't then, within the context of this, use your relationships with the board to then be able to get a nice contract for your business, or within that, the benefits that would come to you. Beyond those examples, we did not find any other additional examples, at least, again, within our initial review of public Big Ten and peers, that would restrict regents or trustees emeriti from holding employment within the university. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and certainly we'll look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Langworthy. Regent Rocha, since you were the first person to raise this as a question, is there anything you'd like to ask or add, or?
Well, thank you, Chair Verhalen, for that indulgence. I appreciate the research. It's, which is somewhat academic, but I think is helpful and informative. I just, in terms of the topics that were just covered, when you talk about paid versus unpaid, I don't know that anybody would have an objection to somebody, unpaid employment in my world is called volunteering, and I'm sure people would be fine with people volunteering their time. I don't, there's, excuse me, and to some extent, being underpaid is it's sort of a form of quasi volunteerism, but it's, when you think about the university, when you think about public entities generally, there's always that challenge about public perception and wanting to be above reproach, wanting to be beyond criticism, in that all the service, certainly from like members of this board, that the service is solely directed at the success of the institution on behalf of the public that we represent, and that it's not, the service is not being done with the interest of self-interest. It's, when we talk about the employment, I think it was the California system when you talk about employment as a member, this is unpaid. We talked about faculty, trustees at other institutions. In past conversations about the University of Minnesota having a faculty regent, that's been the question as well. There's such a direct relationship between their own financial interest and the service on the board. That was addressed in the student regent position, where student regents are allowed to have student employment. I think if a student were made a vice president in our operations group or something with a substantial salary, that would obviously raise some eyebrows among the public. But, you know, as at least one member of this board knows, that there have been conversations about outside employment having the appearance of creating some kind of a conflict that way, and that there's an influence that would not be appropriate for a public board like ours. And in fact, the language was by members of the board at the time, this board must be beyond criticism, and we have to make sure that the public understands that there's no appearance of a conflict in that respect. And so from that standpoint, this is very consistent with the conversations going on at legislatures and in Congress about at what point can a person start lobbying after they've left their position as a member of the body. And that, again, is going to wanting to ensure that the public perceives that body as not being a hand-washing enterprise, but being one that's about the public interest. And so we have had members of our board that have come back to work for the university. I was honored to work with Regent Emeritus Josie Johnson when she came back as a vice president, but that was many years after she had left the board, and the administrative leadership that worked for her as a regent was no longer in place. The first chair of the board that I was elected to in '89, Chuck Casey, came back, not in a leadership position, but he came back in first with the veterinary vet school, and then moved into a deanship, and then eventually became a chancellor of a campus. But that was, again, over years and well after the people that he would have had influence over had left their positions. And so those didn't cause the same, perspective, concern of the recent transition from the board into a highly paid administrative role. And I don't think that helps the university. I think that the public concern that comes from those things is a real concern, and I think that putting something in place of the nature of this of the language that's in front of you squarely reflects that this board holds this as a very important principle in our relationship with the public that we serve. I would note that in the case where there's a rule, but the rule can be waived by the board, I would suggest that even if something of this was put in place and there was something that was so incredibly obvious that we had to, do something outside of this, the board can always exempt the policy by a vote. So, but nonetheless, a provision of this sort would reflect to the public that when people are elected to this board and serve on this board, they're not here for personal advancement, but they're here to advance the interests of the institution. And I think that this would make that very clear. And I think it would set a very appropriate tone and message for the public. Thank you.
Regent Powell?
Thank you, Chair. So, Jason, you referenced the Iowa situation, and I think they're following sort of the state code, if you will. So that sparks the question: what is what code is followed in our legislature? I mean, what is there any guidance in terms of moving from an elected role to a state agency or a commission, or how is that governed?
Mr. Langworthy?
Chair Verhalen, Regent Powell, working with our friends in the Office of the General Counsel, there's nothing that would apply to this board. There's nothing that applies to sort of boards generally within Minnesota statute as it's currently written. There are certainly, and I saw an article, I think this morning in NPR, there are some laws about sort of current legislators and some of those that are being implemented currently, but there's nothing sort of generally in the same way that the Iowa code.
within the Minnesota legislature right now, there is a House rule related to lobbying. But again, that's a rule of their own body.
Okay, so that's a follow-up question. So there's a lobbying prescription, but my understanding or my sense is that it's quite common for legislators to move from an elected official to a role in a commission immediately. And the reason for it, I think, is because they would have significant expertise in certain areas that would make them valuable in that role. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, with Mr. Langworthy, is that something that you'd, as far as research, be willing to take a look into for our next step of this discussion?
Chair Verhalen, Regent Powell, absolutely. I'll also mention, many of those rules, right, is because there is a shift in the duty of loyalty, right? Where you are going from a duty of loyalty to the institution, right, to the body, and then you are shifting now to an outside entity that you are now representing their interests in trying to persuade the body that you were in previously. So oftentimes those rules and laws are trying to sort of work within that duty of loyalty. Certainly, right, you know, the duty of loyalty talks about not providing, you know, yourself with, you know, monetary or personal gain, right? So that would be a different lens to look at it, but many of these lobbying rules are because your duty of loyalty has shifted.
Thank you.
I'm getting a note that we are over time, so if you can make it quick, Mr. Sviggum.
That's probably not possible, Mr. But thank you. I'll try to be as brief as I can, but I do want to address this language, which folks I see is a little bit too restrictive. I think the answer is public disclosure. Public disclosure will put the brakes on any wrong actions or inappropriate actions that take place. But this is not going to affect me at all, not one iota, because I'm pretty soon out of here and I'm not looking for another job. But Regent Rocha, I can see that 2 years from now or a year from now that the law school would want you as an adjunct professor. I think that to restrict our university and the opportunity they have to hire good and wonderful talent is wrong. I think that's bad for the university. And you know, individually, you and I are here, we're as volunteers here. And to restrict our ability, not mine, but yours, some of yours, from making a living, that's wrong. Public disclosure is the key. That puts the brakes on it. Now, most of the revolving door activity, and you were right, Madam Chair, in the House, we passed a 1-year prohibition to being a lobbyist, which I think maybe was appropriate because, you know, people move from legislators to lobbyists. There's no statutory prohibition at all, none. It's a House rule. The Senate doesn't do it at all in the Minnesota legislature. It just seems to me that is too restrictive from one's using of talent, finding talent. If we let everybody know what's going on, disclose publicly, that takes care of it, folks. That takes care of it. Now, again, it doesn't affect me, but let's not restrict the university from getting talent or yourselves sitting here from your opportunity to make a living in the future. Now, again, most revolving door legislation affects being a lobbyist. It doesn't affect employment. I think Congress is the same as the state legislature. Jason, you're shaking your head. Congress restricts for 2 years, maybe?
Federal, yeah.
From being a lobbyist, and only a lobbyist. It doesn't say you can't be in the Department of Defense, or you can't work for the Energy Department or whatever. It doesn't restrict the ability of being able to use talent for that. So, Darren, I apologize. I just think it's way too restrictive. I want you to be able to take your talents and use them for the good of our students. If you become an adjunct professor, which you're not going to be, but you know, it's my example.
You might be.
Madam Chair, thank you. If I can just respond very briefly. I understand what Regent Sviggum is saying. I don't share the perspective that public disclosure alone addresses this. as an officer in the military, there are tremendous restrictions on what I can do outside of my role in service. And I'm a National Guard member. If I were an active duty member, I'd have even more rigid restrictions on what I can do. And I would prefer that rule than to simply say, you can do whatever you want, you just have to disclose it publicly. I think it's much better protection for the integrity and the appearance of that public role. And I think when you take that public role, you accept those restrictions, and maybe 5 years is too much, but the point of ensuring that there is a separation between the relationships and the influence that one has as a member of this board being solely for the purpose of serving the institution and not for the purpose of presenting personal opportunity, I think that that's a valuable integrity point for the public as they review how this board operates and how the university is governed. So, but I appreciate your comments, and Madam Chair, thank you for the chance to speak again.
Just so we're all clear, I didn't make us go over time.
Guilty as charged.
I was looking that way when I said it, so you're good. All right, well, thank you for the discussion, thank you for the work, and we'll take it from here. But there being no additional business before the committee right now, we stand adjourned, and the Board of Regents will reconvene at 9:18.
How about 9:20?
At the request of the chair, 9:20.